Hey guys, it's Dr. Garcia, and today I want to talk to you guys about the best way to balance your hormones. So maybe if maybe you've been struggling with a hormone imbalance, and you're thinking about how the best way to deal with it is. For instance, should I take hormone replacement therapy, or is there a more natural or alternative way? And you're just really not sure. Well, that's why I'm making this video, is to give you a kind of a general overview of the best way to go about thinking about this question, because really there's no right or wrong answer. I think sometimes hormone replacement therapy can actually be beneficial, but I also think that you should also try to get to the root cause of the problem and balance things as much as you can, um, either first or along with doing hormones. So I think the best way to think about this is to understand that there's two models or two viewpoints to look at balancing hormones or treating hormones. And the two models are, number one, we call it the traditional model, or sometimes it's called the replacement model. And that's, most people have heard of that. So when you go to the doctor, they take some blood, and they look at your labs, and they notice that your testosterone or your thyroid or your estrogen is low, and then based on those lab results, they'll recommend or prescribe a certain hormone to help to balance that. Okay, so again, that's called the replacement or traditional model. On the other side of that is what we call the functional model. Okay, and that kind of ties into what's called functional medicine. And in functional medicine, what we do is we try to find the reason why your hormones are out of balance in the first place. Because there's a reason. Our bodies do create hormone imbalance. We have this internal regulatory system that's designed to keep hormones in the right range. And the best way, again, to think about that is like a thermostat. So the thermostat in your house that you set at a certain temperature on the low side and on the high side. And so if the temperature gets too low, the heater will kick on to keep the temperature comfortable. And then if it gets too hot, same thing, the AC will kick on and bring that temperature down into the narrow range, or into the correct range. So your body has that same control mechanism. And specifically what we're talking about is what's called your pituitary gland. So you have this gland in your brain called the pituitary gland that is a hormone sensor. One of the things that it does, it senses the level of hormones in your body. So, for instance, we'll look at thyroid just for an example. If your thyroid levels fall below the normal level, your pituitary gland will pick up on that, and it'll send a signal back to the thyroid gland to upregulate it, to produce more thyroid hormone to bring those levels up. And as those levels come up, once they get too high, what happens is your pituitary gland will sense that too, send a signal back to the thyroid to downregulate or to cool it down, so the thyroid levels come back down into that normal range. So, and this is true of any hormone that you can think about in the body, whether it's estrogen or progesterone or testosterone or cortisol or insulin, or any hormone in the body is controlled in that way. So when things get out of balance, there's a reason why. Okay. So now let's talk about maybe the downside to hormone replacement therapy. So we'll look at a specific example, like testosterone. So if a man comes in with low testosterone, and you take testosterone cream or testosterone hormone replacement, what'll happen is if it's low, the testosterone levels will start to come back up. The pituitary gland will sense that those levels are coming back up, okay, and they're in the normal range. So what your pituitary gland will do is it'll shut down or down-regulate the production of your own testosterone, okay? And if this goes on for too long of a period of time, what happens is that down-regulation continues, and your body loses the ability to make its own natural testosterone. All right, and another thing that happens if this goes on for too long of a period of time is So your body is not making its own hormone, you're getting it from the outside source, but your levels are still increasing. It's a very confusing message to the body. The body's trying to figure out what to do because it's shutting down your own production, but your levels are still elevating. Okay, and what's going to happen is that the receptors that the testosterone or any hormone works on or binds to, those receptors are going to down regulate. They're going to become less sensitive, and you're actually going to get less of those receptors on your cells. So what that means is that with the same amount of testosterone in the body, it's going to be less effective. And I'm sure, if you've been on hormone replacement therapy for any point of time, you might have noticed this yourself where, you start with a certain dose and it has, it might help initially. It has a beneficial effect. But then as time goes on, you might need a little bit more to have that same effect. And then you might need a little bit more to have the same effect. And eventually, you might not get any effect at all from hormone replacement. It might just stop working. And this is something that we see on a regular basis. So now I want to talk about why your hormones do get out of balance, the functional side. There's 4 reasons why your hormones can get out of balance. 4 primary ones. There's other ones as well, but there's 4 I think that are by far the most common that I see in my office. And we'll discuss those and briefly kind of bring those to light. And in future videos, we'll go in a little bit more depth of each of these. So the first one is imbalances in blood sugar. So a blood sugar imbalance ultimately leads to higher levels of insulin and something that's called insulin resistance. And when you have high levels of insulin, that really puts stress on the whole hormonal system or the whole endocrine system. Specifically, what happens, and it happens differently in men and in women. So in men, what happens with high insulin, that creates it upregulates a hormone that's called aromatase, and aromatase is just this enzyme that we have that actually helps to convert testosterone into estrogen. Okay, so in men, if you have higher aromatase, all your testosterone is getting converted into estrogen, which makes you estrogen dominant, makes you have low testosterone, makes you have the symptoms associated with low testosterone, like decreased sex drive or fatigue or afternoon tiredness or all the different loss of muscle mass, increased body fat, all the things that people that we don't like to get as we get older, us men. So, for instance, I had a gentleman that came in last week, and he had been on testosterone therapy for a little while. He came in and he was telling me the story. Like he was initially excited to go on testosterone. He thought it was gonna, make him a new man. And he was surprised because when he started taking it, he started gaining weight. He started, gaining body fat and losing muscle mass, and he was confused. He didn't really understand why. And when we evaluated him, we found that he had actually a blood sugar imbalance. He had higher levels of aromatase, so his testosterone was getting converted into estrogen. Okay, now he was taking extra testosterone, some hormone replacement testosterone, and that was getting converted into estrogen. So he was just rapidly increasing his estrogen levels. So we explained this to him, and now he's on a program to lower his blood sugar and to regulate his blood sugar, and I'm sure he'll do just fine. So the first example is blood sugar. The second example, or the second reason why people get hormone dysregulation is with blood sugar. We talked about blood sugar. The second one is actually stress levels. So stress hormones. You guys maybe have heard of cortisol. Cortisol is a major stress hormone when our body's in fight or flight, or when we have prolonged stress over a long period of time. Our cortisol levels elevate, which is not good for health. But along with that, when you have high cortisol, a hormone that's called DHEA tends to lower. So you get high cortisol and low DHEA. That's a typical stress pattern. And that low DHEA is actually what creates the hormonal problem, the hormonal dysregulation. So DHEA is a precursor molecule. So from DHEA, from this adrenal hormone, your body makes testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. So if you're under stress, you have high cortisol, you have low DHEA, you don't have enough of that hormone to make healthy levels of your sex hormones. Okay, this is probably the most common cause of hormone imbalance that I see in my office, at least, is because stress has really become a way of life for us nowadays. And one point with stress that I want to make is that it's not just going through a divorce or losing your job or losing a loved one. Those are obviously stresses, but there's another layer of stress that a lot of times we don't consider. For instance, lack of sleep. Okay, if you're not getting 7 to 8 hours of restful sleep every night, over time, that's been shown to really upregulate that cortisol production and that whole stress response. Okay, another example is if you have a chronic infection. We see a lot of people that have chronic gut infections or even food allergies. These are stressful events on the body, and over time, the body responds to this stress, and it can create that same stress pattern. So you can get the high cortisol, low DHEA pattern. Okay, so it's important to get your stress levels under control if you want to balance out your hormones. Right? The third is the gut. Okay, the third example of why your hormones can get out of balance is imbalances in the digestive tract. Not just for its effect on stress, but locally in the gut, if you have what's called dysbiosis, which is it's an imbalance of the friendly and unfriendly bacteria, that alone leads to hormone dysregulation. Okay, when you have higher levels of these unfriendly bacteria, it upregulates, or you end up making more of a certain chemical that's called beta-glucuronidase. And this is an enzyme, and what this enzyme does is it breaks apart the conjugation of estrogen. So our bodies have to remove estrogen from our system. It's normal to make estrogen, but your body also has to be able to break it down or to remove it. So estrogen levels don't just keep accumulating over time. Okay, and beta-glucuronidase through the liver is one of the ways that the body recycles or takes estrogen out of the body. So if we have higher levels of beta-glucuronidase, what happens is that recycling bond gets broken apart, and that estrogen gets recycled or gets released back into the body, and over time it can cause estrogen levels to increase, creating symptoms. Okay, and then the fourth example of the functional model, what can create hormone imbalances, is imbalances in toxicity and in the liver. Okay, we talked a little bit about beta-glucuronidase. That takes place in the liver. Okay, there's another pathway in the liver that's called methylation, which is another way that the body has of recycling hormones. And a lot of people are slow methylators or poor methylators because of a genetic defect, and also because of a deficiency of some specific vitamins like B12 and B6 and magnesium and folic acid. So your liver has to be working properly in order to recycle or to take hormones out of the body to keep them at that normal level. And the final reason with toxicity in the liver is that there's certain chemicals in our environment. They're called xenoestrogens, and what these are, they're kind of like toxic estrogens. They're like an example would be like bisphenol A or BPA, which is from a plastic, or pesticides, or cleaning agents. These chemicals have certain properties, and when they get in our bodies, they actually mimic estrogen. They bind to estrogen receptors, and they create an estrogen response in our bodies, and it's one of the ways that we become estrogen dominant, which is, we just see that so much nowadays in our patient profiles. So those are the four main issues of how the functional model. It's important to understand the whole body, not just focus in on a low hormone and try to get that back up, but try to find the root underlying cause of the problem. And in future videos, we'll be a lot more specific about each one of those and show you guys the best way to fix those naturally. Again, I'm Dr. Paul Garcia, and thanks for watching.